Ministry. This is Reverend Liz Jackson. Today's sermon is True Word of Yah, His Calendar, Changing of Times, Part 1. As we learned in the sermons on creation, Jubilees contains more detail as to what occurred and how we all got here. This sermon will examine the real calendar, Abba Yah's calendar. Daniel 7:25. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times, and the dividing of times. So in order to understand this verse, we need to go back and look at Daniel chapter 7. For this verse is part of Daniel's dream that he had regarding the end times and the return of our God, Abba Yah, also known as the merging of spirit and physical realms, also known as separation of darkness and light, also known as the final resurrection, when everything becomes as it once was and was meant to be. So, when we know the real calendar, we learn that Daniel has a specific time in history that we can point to that is in his dream. And that will be a sermon for a different day, as this sermon is just for the calendars and an explanation of how time is not correct. So again, this is part 1 because there's more about time and years and what has been changed, and we will talk about that next. So in the sermon on creation, we learned the sun is the keeper of seasons. Jubilees chapter 2, 9 through 10 states, and God appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days, and for Sabbaths, and for months, and for feasts, and for years, and for Sabbaths of years, and for Jubilees, and for all seasons of the years. And it divides the light from the darkness for prosperity, that all things may prosper, which shoot and grow on the earth. So again, the purpose of the sun, which will be a sermon more in detail, but purpose of the sun, days, months, Sabbaths, feasts, years, Sabbaths of years, Jubilees, all the seasons of the year, day from night, darkness and light, prosperity, so all things on earth can grow. Purpose of the sun. We're going to focus in this sermon on 4, and those are months, years, Sabbaths of years, and Jubilees, which are going to help us understand Daniel's prophecy and the players he is identifying in sermons yet to come. For now, we will learn the real time and how it was changed. Jubilees 6:36 through 38. And this is the angel telling Moses all of this. Remember, the angel gave Moses Jubilees on Mount Sinai. For I know, and from henceforth will I declare it unto thee, and it is not of my own devising, for the book lies written before me, and on the heavenly tablets the division of days is ordained, lest they forget the feasts of the covenant, and walk according to the feasts of the Gentiles, after their error and after their ignorance. For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons and comes in from year to year, 10 days too soon. For this reason, the years will come upon them when they will disturb the order and make an abominable day the day of testimony, and an unclean day a feast day. And they will confound all the days, the holy with the unclean, and the unclean day with the holy, for they will go wrong as to the months and Sabbaths and feasts and Jubilees. For this reason I command and testify to thee, that thou mayest testify to them, for after thy death thy children will disturb them, so that they will not make the year 364 days only. And for this reason they will go wrong as to the new moons and seasons and Sabbaths and festivals, and they will eat all kinds of blood with all kinds of flesh. So Abba Yah is clear, and he even shows what I just read to Daniel in his dream. How do we know this? By breaking Daniel chapter 7, verse 25 down. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times. Times is H2166, and it means a set time, or season. The book of Jubilees states that the Lord God inscribed time in the heavenly tablets, the division of days, and gave it to Moses, a copy, for the book lied before him on the heavenly tablets of the division of days. What is inscribed in heaven is forever, my brothers and sisters. But man chooses to manipulate Abba Yah's order in his set time. How do we know the lunar cycle is wrong? Because Abba Yah's word tells us that we are to follow the sun and the sun only. As you see, Daniel said, set time, and season. These are the months, years, Sabbaths of years, and Jubilees spoken of that will be and has been changed. So again, what is the correct calendar cycle? It is a solar cycle. How long is a year? A year is 364 days. And that is actually what the current calendar, called the Gregorian calendar, is based upon, the solar portion only, because it is modified based upon the Council of Nicaea and some portions of the old Roman calendar, and not in truth. And we'll get to that at the end of this sermon, more regarding when the Gregorian calendar was put into place and why. Let us now move on to Enoch, for Enoch tells us the exact path the sun takes. He states over and over and over that the sun marks 364 days. These days are kept by the vernal equinox, which occurs in the spring, and spring is the true beginning of the year. How do we know this? Because Enoch chapter 72, verses 32 through 35 tells us, on that day the night decreases and amounts to 9 parts, and the day to 9 parts, and the night is equal to the day, and the year is exactly as it is days 364. And the length of the day and of the night, and of the shortness of the day and of the night arise through the course of the sun. These distinctions are made, and then they are separated, So it becomes that its courses become daily longer and its night courses nightly shorter. And this is the law and the course of the sun, and his return is often as his returns 60 times and rises, the great luminary, which is the sun forever and ever. So again, we learn in chapter 72 of Enoch that it is a law that the sun makes courses throughout the day, which becomes shorter depending on the changing of the seasons because the sun controls the seasons. So man again, as Daniel stated in Daniel 7:25, changed laws, the heavenly laws of the luminaries, aka the sun and the moon. How do we know they changed it? And how do we know they know the truth? Because when you Google when is night and day equal, you will find the equinoxes happen in March, about March 21st, and September, about September 23rd. These are the days when the sun is exactly above the equator, which makes day and night of equal length. So in the northern hemisphere, you have vernal equinoxes about March 21st, day and night of equal length, marking the start of spring. Again, according to Enoch and God's word, spring is the actual new year, and we're going to remember throughout this sermon too that Uriel, the angel who is in charge of the luminaries, is the one who showed Enoch, because Enoch was not in a dream, Enoch was not in an hallucination, he was in the realms of heavens, brought up by God. For Enoch is one of the two witnesses mentioned in Revelation. So let's keep that in mind. Now, back to the sermon. So when the northern hemisphere has the spring equinox, also known as the vernal equinox, the southern hemisphere has the autumnal equinox. The equinox that occurs in the northern hemisphere during autumn is the autumnal equinox. In the northern hemisphere, it occurs about September 23rd. Day and night of equal length, marking the start of autumn. So we're going to have a sermon on flat earth because when you look this up, you're going to see the tilt that NASA put in the description of the earth. There is no tilt, and you need not to understand, why right now, but you need to know that the path of the sun is explained in Enoch, and you can map that out on a flat earth. So what you can do is take what Enoch says and take the Mercator map and mark it out yourself, and you will see the course of the sun and moon and the way it changes and how the seasons, because the seasons are true, the equator is true because it is split north and south. We know this. And follow the directions. I will have a video on that because I really want to do that, and that sounds like so exciting. So we're going to do that together. That was put in my heart last night, so I really want to do that, and we're going to do that project together. So we're going to map out on a flat earth what Enoch says. Let me leave it out right there. Exciting. Okay, So now back to the sermon. We should all by now understand that Abba Yah does not start things during death or decay. The true new year is spring and not December. So question, which of our brothers and sisters actually celebrate on or near the real New Year's date using truth? That's what Abba Yah said we need to know. So let's turn to the Iranian New Year, which is Shem's descendants. And in March, it occurred, or in 2016, it occurred on March 20th, 2016. And it states, also celebrating the commencement of spring, Nowruz is celebrated by both Zoroastrian and Baha'i communities. The date itself coincides with the northward equinox, which falls in mid-March each year. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling. I still feel God and really energized. So, like, trying to come back and read, let me take a moment because I'm excited about that project. And the more truth he reveals, the more we grow together. And I just want to say that. So let me de-escalate for a second. All right, so the Iranian New Year, which occurred March 20th, 2016, also celebrating the commencement of spring, Nowruz is celebrated by both Zoroastrian and Baha'i communities. The date itself coincides with the northward equinox, which falls in mid-year March each year. The day typically celebrated with trumpets to herald the new year, colored eggs and pots of sprouting grain to signify growth, a hearty bowl of ashrish noodle soup, and a most famously with a good spring cleaning. So next we look at Ham's descendants, Aluth Avarudu, Sinhalese New Year. This is in Sri Lanka. It occurred on April 14th, 2016. I didn't find updated information. This is what Abba Yah showed me just to give us an illustration, okay? If you wanted to know what happened this year, please, by all means, look it up. Simple Google search, I promise you. Now that you know the names. But anyway, these are Ham's descendants. Though Aluth Avrud is a Sinhalese festival, it coincides with Tamil New Year's and is celebrated by most people in Sri Lanka. Unlike other cultures whose New Year's Day welcomes harvest, Aluth Avruda marks the end of the harvest season. It also coincides with one of two instances when the sun is directly above Sri Lanka. Locals celebrate the day by opening their front doors to encourage visiting by family, friends, and even strangers. The preparation of small oil cakes called kavum and several tropical plantation dishes are popular at this time too. Again, some of Ham's descendants around Sri Lanka. A festival called Tamil New Year or Puthandu, April 14th, 2016. Puthandu, celebrated annually on April 14th, follows the solar calendar. The day is celebrated with new clothes, music, sweets, and rice flour columns at the front of homes, which is columns, rice flour is street art. So that's kind of cool. Look that up. That's something we could start doing. That's interesting. Puthandu is celebrated predominantly in the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu and in Sri Lanka. However, other Tamil diasporas in Malaysia and Singapore also celebrate the holiday. And these are just a few examples of cultures that follow the solar calendar and celebrate New Year when it's supposed to be celebrated. So these are cultures that we're going to learn more about because Abba Yah says that we have to start tying each other together. When we understand how Noah divides the land and how all land links to one creator, and that is the Hebrew name Abba Yah, Y-A-H, because you find that in Paleo Hebrew around the world. So, our next question is, what is the oldest calendar in use today? The oldest calendar still in use today is the Jewish calendar, which has been in popular use since the 9th century BC. It is based on biblical calculations that place the creation at 3761 BC. My question to you is the Jewish calendar correct? No, because it is a luni-solar calendar. The Hebrew calendar, also called Jewish calendar, is a luni-solar calendar used today for Jewish religious observance and as an official calendar of the State of Israel. The definition of a lunisolar means of concerning the combined motions or effects of the sun and moon. So, Jubilees told us that we should not do that. Enoch told us that we should not do that the sun is the only marker of time. Again, how can we confirm what Jubilee states? Enoch tells us the purpose of the sun as well. He is, again, the one of two witnesses in the end times, and how it marks exactly 364 days in a year and is the only marker of time. Again, Abba Yah told me last night as I was writing this to remind us all that Enoch was shown all the information that he wrote down regarding the sun, moon, and stars by the holy angel Uriel. He did not just dream this, he was taken up to these realms. Enoch is recording this information that he has been shown as directed by the Lord God Abba Yah himself. So the source of this information should always be considered legit because it wasn't just a dream, but actual places he went to. Uriel again is the angel in charge of the luminaries and thus showed Enoch according to what God commanded. Enoch 72 verse 1 tells us this, the book of the course of the luminaries of the heaven, the relations of each according to their classes, their dominion and their seasons, according to their names and places of origin, and according to their months, which Uriel, the holy angel, who was with me, who is their guide, showed me. And he showed me all their laws exactly as they are, and how it is with regard to all the years of the world and unto eternity, till the new creation is accomplished, which dureth till eternity. So again, we are told that until the world and new creation are in place, the revelation of the sun, moon, and stars do not change their laws. And that is what man, again, has done. And that is what Daniel says man will do and has done. So, my question to you is this. We just learned that even the Jews don't have the correct calendar. When was the 9th century BC? That was 900 to 801 BC. So what calendar did the Hebrews use before 900 BC? To answer this, we need to look at our ancestors, because all roads lead to Babylon. Babylon was the first and is mentioned in Jubilees, and so is Nimrod, and that's a separate sermon to come. For now, we need to know When was the Tower of Babel built? Because a lot of people want to associate Nimrod with Babel, separate events, and we can't do that. So some scholars use internal and external evidence to offer 3,500 to 3,000 BC as a likely range for the date of the Tower of Babel. According to the Book of Jubilees, the tower was built from 1648 to 1688, or 1645, to 1688. The destruction occurred in the 17th Jubilee during the first year of the 49 years a Jubilee is made of during the first week of that year. It took, let me try to remember, it took approximately 43 years, I believe Jubilee said, and I will add that into the sermon, for them to build the Tower of Babel. And I could sit here and do that math, but I'm not. So I'll add that into the sermon. So again, the destruction, according to Jubilees, occurred in the 17th Jubilee during the first year of the 49 years a Jubilee is made of during the first week of that year. So the Tower of Babel was built by man only 833 years after man was created. And I will have the next sermon on how to reach what a Jubilee is next, because it's a lot of information to process and it's heavy. So the next question was, when was ancient Babylon? Babylon becomes a major military power under Amorite King Hammurabi, who ruled from 1792 to 1750 BC. Babylon changed the system to a lunar system. So did the Tower of Babel, but it was not nearly as apparent until Babylon. So the calendar, University of Texas, tells us this. The ancient Babylonians had a lunisolar calendar of 12 lunar months of 30 days each, and they added extra months when necessary to keep the calendar in line with the seasons of the year. The ancient Egyptians were the first to replace the lunar calendar with a calendar based on the solar year. They measured the solar year as 365 days divided into 12 months of 3 days each, with 5 extra days at the end. Now, we learn that Moses is told after his death, Abba Yah's children will sabotage Yah's inscribed in heaven laws commanding his seasons, times, and years. Again, we refer back to Jubilees, chapter 6, verse 38. For this reason I command and testify to thee, that thou may testify to them, for after thy death thy children will disturb them, so that they will not make the year 364 days only. So we will again break more information down as to regarding timeline, because when you put Moses, Abraham into a timeline of historical information that everyone else tells you is correct, you find out what really happened. So let's look at this. Our brothers and sisters from Ham's territory, known as ancient Egypt, tried to restore Abba Yah's timeline. The Egyptians appear to have been the first to develop a solar calendar, but they used the stars as a point of reference, and that was not correct, as Enoch said. So then they came up with 365 days. So they're a day off. Ancient Aztec, also Ham's territory. The Aztecs used 2 calendars to compute the days of the year. I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but I am. So it's Zeutholi. The first, or solar calendar, consisted of 365 days divided into 18 months of 20 units each. Cahokia Mounds, Illinois, United States, Japheth territory. I live 20 minutes from there. And when I need to go meditate and absorb Abba Yah in the sun, I do so. It states interviews with archaeologists provide an explanation of Cahokia's urban layout and the similarities to the celestial blueprint of Teotihuacan. These archaeological discoveries with Cahokia's wood hinge, which is a ring of cedar posts that act as a solar calendar to determine when to plant and harvest and gather for ceremonies. The people of Cahokia considered the area a sacred space. Like the Sun Pyramid in Teotihuacan, the location of Woodhenge is precisely aligned with the sun's movements. So, Mesoamerica, again, Japheth or Ham's, depending on movement of north or south. The oldest form of the calendar, the solar round, was likely invented by the Olmec, Epi-Olmec, or Izapans, about 900 to 700 BC, when agriculture was first established. The sacred round may have been developed as a subdivision of the 365-year one as a tool specifically designed to track important dates for farming. The earliest confirmed combination of sacred and solar rounds is found in the Oaxaca Valley at the Zapotec capital site of Monte Alban. There, Stela 12 has a date which reads 594 BC. There were at least 60 or so different calendars invented in pre-Columbian Mesoamerican, and several dozen communities throughout the region still use versions of it. It's important to understand that other cultures, civilizations are tied together, and this is how we must view the world from here on out. Now, we learn that some of our ancestors restored as close to possible a calendar back to Abba Yah's word. And again, we will dive into these civilizations more and prove that Hebrew, Paleo-Hebrew, has been found and that they all correlate together. But if you have been following again, Noah divides the land, explanation should not be necessary. For God should have put that in your heart that His word is true regarding this information. So, what calendar is close to correct according to Jubilees and Enoch? The Byzantine calendar, also called Roman calendar, creation era of Constantinople, or era of the world, was the calendar used by the Eastern Orthodox Church from 691 to 1728 in the Emanuel Patriot. It was also the official calendar of the Byzantine Empire from 988 to 1453, and of the Kievan Rus and Russia from 988 to 1700. This calendar used also in other areas of the Byzantine Commonwealth, such as Serbia, where it is found in old Serbian legal documents, such as Dusa's Code, thus being referred to as the Serbian calendar as well. Since Byzantine is a historiographical term, the original names use the adjective Roman as it was what the Eastern Roman Empire continued to call itself. The calendar, the Byzantine calendar, was based on the Julian calendar, except that the year started on September 1st and the year number used an Anno Mundi epic derived from the Septuagint version of the Bible. It placed the date of creation at 5,509 years before the incarnation of Jesus and was characterized by a certain tendency that had already been a tradition among Jews and early Christians to number the years from the calculated foundation of the world. Again, that is what the book of Jubilees uses, and Enoch, because they correlate. Latin Annus Mundi, or AM. It's 1 year marking the supposed date of creation. They believe that was September 1st, 5509 BC to August 31st, 5508 BC. Makes no sense. Again, that was added in there, but as you can see, the Byzantine calendar actually had some basis to what Enoch and Jubilees stated. So the next question is, when was the Byzantine Empire? And that started May 11th, 330 AD. My next question to you is this: is the Julian calendar correct? No, because we just read that. But the Julian calendar is still used in parts of the Eastern Orthodox Church and in parts of the Oriental Orthodoxy, as well as by the Berbers. The Julian calendar has two types of years: a normal year of 365 days and a leap year of 366. The Julian calendar predecessor, the Roman calendar, was a very complicated lunar calendar based on the moon phases. It required a group of people to decide when days should be added or removed in order to keep the calendar in sync with the astronomical seasons, marked by the equinoxes and solstices, except that they used the moon and not the sun solstices. In order to create a more standardized calendar, Julius Caesar consulted an Alexandrian and not a real Hebrew named Sosigenes and created a more regulated civil calendar, a solar calendar based entirely on Earth's revolutions around the sun, also called a tropical year. It takes our planet, on average, approximately 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 45 seconds to complete one full orbit around the sun. When we get into flat Earth, you're going to understand why that's not true, because we're going to use Enoch to prove that. However, here we learn Caesar was close, again, much closer than the lunar calendar. And we know that they won't admit Abba Yah is right, and they won't use his time. How do we know this? Because our next question is the Gregorian calendar correct? And the answer is no. But today, the vast majority of the world uses what is known as the Gregorian calendar, named after a Pope, Gregory VIII, who introduced it in 1582. The Gregorian calendar replaced the Julian calendar, which has been the most used calendar in Europe until this point. They continue to say, by the Julian reckoning, the solar year comprised 365 and a fourth day, and the intercalation of a leap day every 4 years was intended to maintain correspondence between the calendar and the seasons. A slight inaccuracy in the measurement, the solar year comprising more precisely 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, 45.25 seconds, caused the calendar days of the season to regress almost 1 day per century. So again, even their calculations causes the seasons to regress. That is what God said was going to happen, and that is what happens, because nobody will put it back to the book of Jubilees, because they can't, because they manipulated time so much that when God comes back, he says, I restore time and my feast days because you all messed it up. So, although this regression has amounted to 14 days by Pope Gregory's time, he based his reform on restoration of the vernal equinox, which that part is true, then falling on March 11th to March 21st, the date it occurred in 325 CE, which was the time of the First Council of Nicaea, and not the date of the equinox at the time of the birth of Yahushua HaMashiach, when it fell on March 25th. The change was effected by advancing the calendar 10 days after October 4th, 1582, the day following being reckoned on October 15th. So here we learned our Messiah's birth date, as well as where and how and why they changed time. And it was all because they want to hide our identity. The real new year is the vernal equinox. Yahushua's birth date, March 25th. For when you ask questions, you receive answers. And here is where the sermon ends. As always, it's never goodbye, but I'll see you later.